In Ashford Springs, Pennsylvania, a desperate widow was about to gamble her last $47,000 on a cursed mansion. What started as a survival move took a shocking turn when her daughter discovered $350 million hidden in the basement. Laura Matthew wasn't your typical single mother. For 2 years since her husband's death, she had fought to keep her family afloat, known for her unwavering integrity even in desperation. When they found the fortune, they had no idea they were walking into a deadly confrontation with both the living and the dead. A battle that would force Laura to choose between survival and her soul. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The U-Haul's brakes squealed as Laura Matthew pulled into the circular drive, gravel crunching beneath tires that had carried everything she owned across 3 states. Blackwood Manor rose before them like something conjured from a fever dream, a Victorian stone monstrosity that seemed to devour the pale autumn light rather than reflect it. 3 stories of dark granite and rotting timber, turrets reaching toward gray clouds like accusing fingers. Laura's hands remained locked on the steering wheel long after she'd turned off the engine. "This is it." Maya's voice cut from the back seat, sharp with disbelief. "This is what you spent our money on?" Tommy pressed his face against the window, his breath fogging the glass. He didn't speak, but his fingers traced something Laura couldn't see. Patterns only he understood. "It needs work," Laura said. The words felt inadequate. The mansion didn't need work. It needed salvation. "But the bones are good. Victorian construction, solid foundation. It looks like someone died here." Maya shoved open the door, her backpack hitting the gravel with more force than necessary. "Multiple someones." Laura wanted to argue, but her daughter wasn't wrong. The mansion had the appearance of a place that had forgotten how to be lived in. Windows like empty eyes, their glass filmed with decades of grime. The wraparound porch sagged in the middle, missing boards creating gaps like broken teeth. Vines crawled up the eastern wall with aggressive intent, their leaves gone brown with the season. $47,000. Her last savings. David's life insurance, what remained after the hospital bills and the mortgage payments she couldn't make alone. All of it poured into this crumbling monument to someone else's vanished wealth. The real estate agent's car was already there, a sleek silver sedan that looked obscene against the mansion's decay. Laura had barely stepped from the U-Haul when the agent materialized on the porch, clipboard clutched like a shield. "Mrs. Matthew." He descended the steps with careful precision, as if testing each board's integrity. Gerald Hutchins, mid-50s, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Right on time." "Ms. Matthew," Laura corrected automatically. The widow designation still felt foreign even 2 years later. Hutchins's smile tightened fractionally. "Of course. Well, shall we complete the walkthrough? I have another appointment in." He glanced at his watch with theatrical emphasis. 45 minutes. Laura noticed he didn't offer to help with their belongings. Didn't acknowledge Maya's hostile stare or the way Tommy had pressed himself against her leg, his small hand finding hers. The keys changed hands with bureaucratic efficiency. Hutchins produced documents that Laura signed without reading as carefully as she should have. Her attention kept drifting to the mansion's facade, searching for some sign that she hadn't made the worst mistake of her life. "The property is sold as is." Naturally. Hutchins's voice carried the rehearsed quality of someone who'd given this speech before. "All inspections waived per the contract terms. The town is... Well, frankly, Ms. Matthew, they're relieved someone finally bought the place." "Why?" Tommy spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but clear. "Why is everyone relieved?" Hutchins's professional veneer cracked slightly. He looked at Tommy with something that might have been pity or might have been warning. "Old houses have old stories. People in Ashford Springs have long memories. But that's all they are, stories." "What kind of stories?" Maya had drifted closer, her artist's eye cataloging the mansion's details. Laura saw her daughter's fingers twitch, reaching for the sketchbook she always carried. The kind that keep property values low. Hutchins handed Laura the final document. "Which worked in your favor, didn't it? Now, if you'll excuse me." Wait. Laura caught his arm, felt him stiffen at the contact. The utilities. You said they'd be turned on. Electric and water, yes. The gas line was capped in 1987. Something about a leak. You'll need to arrange reconnection yourself if you want heat beyond the fireplaces. He pulled free with practiced courtesy. Welcome to Blackwood Manor, Ms. Matthew. I'm sure you'll find it memorable. He was in his car before Laura could ask what that meant. Gravel sprayed as he accelerated away, leaving the three of them alone with their future. The mansion waited. Laura forced her shoulders back, summoning reserves of confidence she didn't feel. All right, let's see what we've got. The front door required significant force to open, its hinges screaming protest. The sound echoed through what Laura could now see was a grand entrance hall, or had been decades ago. A massive staircase dominated the space, its carved banister coated in dust thick enough to write in. Wallpaper hung in defeated strips, revealing plaster beneath that had gone gray with age and water damage. The chandelier overhead tilted at a dangerous angle, several crystals missing like extracted teeth. But the ceiling was high and the floor was solid, and somewhere beneath the decay, Laura could see what this place had been, could imagine what it might become. 3 floors, she said, her voice echoing strangely in the empty space. The 3rd floor was probably servants' quarters originally. We can use it for storage until we renovate. The 2nd floor has 6 bedrooms according to the listing. You two can each pick one. Make it your own. I don't want to make anything my own. Maya's backpack hit the floor. I want to go home. This is home now. This isn't home. Home was Dad making pancakes on Saturday. Home was our street where I knew everyone's name. Home was... Maya's voice cracked. She turned away sharply, but not before Laura saw tears tracking through the dust on her daughter's face. This is just where we ended up because you couldn't keep your job. The accusation landed like a physical blow. Laura felt her own anger rising, hot and defensive. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Maya's voice pitched higher. I had a summer program, a real chance at art school. But we had to move, had to start over in some town that looks like it's been dead for 20 years. And you bought this horror movie set thinking what? That we'd be grateful? I thought we'd have a chance. Laura heard her own exhaustion bleeding through. I thought if we had a place, something we owned, we could rebuild. The bed and breakfast plan, it's solid. Once we renovate with what money? Maya laughed, bitter and sharp. You spent everything on this place. Everything Dad left us. And for what? Tommy tugged Laura's hand. Mom, there's someone in the corner. Both women turned. The corner where the staircase met the wall was empty, thick with shadows despite the pale daylight filtering through filthy windows. There's nobody there, sweetheart. Laura squeezed his hand gently. There is. Tommy's certainty was absolute. He tilted his head, studying something Laura couldn't see. A boy. He's sad. He says. Tommy's brow furrowed in concentration. He says we shouldn't have come here. Maya wrapped her arms around herself. Great. The house is haunted. That's perfect. That's exactly what we needed. It's not haunted. Laura forced conviction into her voice. Tommy, it's just shadows. New place, lots of dark corners. Your imagination. I'm not imagining him. Tommy's voice carried the stubborn certainty that meant he wouldn't be argued out of this position. His name is Walter. He died here when he was my age. Silence settled over the entrance hall, broken only by the sound of wind finding its way through gaps in the walls. Laura felt something cold trace down her spine. Not quite fear, not yet, but its precursor. The sensation of standing at the edge of something that couldn't be taken back. Let's get our things from the truck, she said finally. We'll pick out bedrooms, set up the air mattresses. Tomorrow we'll start making this place livable. They worked in silence broken only by necessary coordination. 3 trips each, carrying boxes and bags that contained everything they had left. Laura noted how Maya chose the bedroom farthest from the staircase, how Tommy insisted on keeping his door open, so Walter won't be alone. By the time darkness fell, They'd accomplished the basics. 3 bedrooms with inflated mattresses. A cooler of food in the kitchen that still smelled of gas despite decades without it. Battery-powered lanterns casting weak circles of light against the encroaching dark. Laura stood in what had been a library. Shelves empty except for mouse droppings and water stains. The windows here faced east, toward what the listing had called extensive grounds. In the dying light, she could make out shapes that might have been gardens once, now gone wild. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister. Made it okay? Laura typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on. We're here. House needs work but we'll manage. The lie felt necessary. If she admitted the truth, that the house was barely habitable, that Maya hated her, that Tommy was seeing ghosts, that she'd gambled everything on a property that might be worthless, then it became real. Undeniable. Her phone's calculator app was still open from the drive. She pulled it up again, running numbers she'd memorized. 47,000 for the house. For 1,000 remaining. After first month's utilities, insurance, food, maybe 2,000 left. Then nothing. She'd need income within 6 weeks. 8 at most. The bed and breakfast plan required renovation. She'd estimated 20,000 minimum to make even part of the house guest ready. Money she didn't have. Wouldn't have unless she found work, and Ashford Springs was a town in decline. The drive through its main street had shown more closed storefronts than open ones. Laura's reflection in the grimy window looked back at her. A woman on the edge of 40 who felt decades older. Hair she no longer had time to color showing gray at the roots. Shoulders permanently tense from carrying weight that never lightened. What have I done? Footsteps on the stairs made her turn. Tommy, his journal clutched to his chest. Can't sleep. He shook his head. The house is too loud. Laura listened. Now that he'd said it, she could hear it, not silence, but the accumulated sounds of an old building settling. Creaks and groans, the whisper of wind through cracks. Something that might have been water in pipes that shouldn't have water. Come here. She held out her arm and Tommy fit himself against her side, the way he had since he was small. Tell me about Walter. Tommy was quiet for a long moment. He's scared. Not of us. Of something else. Something that lives in the basement. Tommy. I know you don't believe me. His voice carried no accusation, just resigned acceptance. It's okay. Dad used to believe me. The mention of David hit Laura like it always did, unexpected and devastating. She pulled Tommy closer, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo, feeling the fragile weight of him against her. I believe that you believe it, she said finally. And that's enough for now. They stood together in the darkness, mother and son, while the house continued its symphony of decay around them. Laura tried to remember what hope felt like. Tried to recall the moment when buying this mansion had seemed like salvation instead of suicide. The sound came at exactly midnight. Laura would check her phone later and confirm the time. A sound like thunder, but sharper, more deliberate. Every door in the house slammed shut simultaneously. Tommy jerked in her arms. From down the hall, Maya's voice called out, sharp with fear, Mom! Laura's heart hammered against her ribs. She moved on instinct, pulling Tommy toward the hall, toward Maya's voice. But the library door, which she'd left open, had walked through moments ago, was now firmly closed. The handle turned under her hand, but the door didn't budge. Mom! Maya's voice, louder now, panicked. I'm here. Laura threw her shoulder against the door. Old wood it should give. I'm coming. Another sound, this one distinctly footsteps, heavy and deliberate, crossing the floor above them. The 3rd floor, where no one should be. Tommy's hand found hers in the darkness. It's not Walter, he whispered. Walter's nice. This is the other one. The one who built the house. The library door swung open abruptly, so suddenly Laura nearly fell through it. She caught herself on the frame, pulled Tommy with her into the hall. Maya's door was open now too, her daughter standing in the doorway with a flashlight gripped like a weapon. What was that? Maya's voice shook. What the hell was that? I don't know. Laura's own voice sounded steadier than she felt. Old house? Wind caught all the doors. Don't. Maya cut her off. Don't do that. Don't explain away things that can't be explained. I'm 16, not stupid. That wasn't wind. Laura wanted to argue, wanted to provide rational explanation for irrational events. But standing in the dark hallway of Blackwood Manor, her children frightened and her own hands shaking, she couldn't find the words. Above them, the footsteps continued their measured pace. Back and forth, like someone walking a familiar route, wearing grooves and floorboards through repetition across decades. We'll sleep together tonight, Laura said. All of us in my room. Tomorrow we'll figure this out. Tomorrow we should leave, Maya said, but she didn't resist when Laura guided them all back to the master bedroom, didn't object when they arranged themselves on the single air mattress like refugees from disaster, which Laura supposed they were. She lay awake long after both children's breathing had evened into sleep. Her phone's calculator glowed in the darkness, numbers cycling through possibilities, all of them ending in failure. 2 months of funds, less if she had to hire help for repairs she couldn't manage alone. The footsteps had stopped, but Laura could still hear them in her memory, could still feel the moment when every door had slammed, as if the house itself had taken a breath and made a decision. Welcome, it seemed to say. Now you're mine. Laura closed her eyes and calculated how many months until her savings ran out completely. The answer, she knew, was the same as when she'd started. Not enough. Never enough. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling windows in their frames. Somewhere in the house, something fell with a distant crash. And in the corner of the room, though Laura refused to look, refused to acknowledge, she could swear she felt someone watching, waiting. The mansion had waited decades for new occupants. Now that they'd arrived, Laura had the sinking certainty that leaving wouldn't be as simple as loading the U-Haul and driving away. Blackwood Manor had claimed them, and whatever haunted its walls wasn't finished with them yet. Laura woke to sunlight filtering through grimy windows, her body aching from the air mattress and a night of fractured sleep. Maya and Tommy were still pressed against her sides, their breathing deep and even. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply exist in that small warmth, the only certainty she had left. Then memory returned. The slamming doors, the footsteps overhead, Tommy's whispered warnings about things that lived in the basement. She extracted herself carefully, leaving the children sleeping, and made her way downstairs. Morning light did nothing to improve the mansion's appearance. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. If anything, it highlighted every flaw, the water stains spreading across ceilings like dark continents, the places where plaster had simply given up and fallen away, the pervasive smell of mold and abandonment. The library door stood open. She'd left it that way after last night's incident, but still, Laura found herself testing the handle. Solid. Normal. Just a door in an old house. Just a door that slammed shut on its own. She pushed the thought away and headed for the kitchen. Coffee. She needed coffee and a plan that didn't involve supernatural explanations for natural phenomena. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from her sister and a voicemail she wasn't ready to listen to yet. Instead, she pulled up the contact the hardware store owner had given her yesterday. James Kearns. Local contractor. Fair prices and honest work. The owner had promised. Only one left in town worth calling. Laura typed out a text before she could second-guess the expense. Ms. Matthew from Blackwood Manor. Need assessment for renovation work. Available today? The response came within minutes. Can be there in an hour. Fair warning, I've heard stories about that place. Haven't we all? Laura thought, but typed back. I'll put on coffee. She was attempting to coax the ancient coffee maker into function when Maya appeared in the doorway, hair tangled and eyes still heavy with sleep. Did last night actually happen? Her daughter's voice was smaller than usual, stripped of yesterday's anger. I think so. Laura saw no point in lying. But we're okay. We're safe. Are we? Maya moved into the kitchen, her artist's eye cataloging details. Mom, something's wrong with this house. You felt it too. I know you did. Laura measured coffee grounds, buying time to construct an answer. Old houses make sounds. Settling foundations, temperature changes affecting the wood. All the doors at exactly the same time. Maya's voice sharpened with familiar frustration. And the footsteps? You're going to tell me that was pipes? I don't know what it was. Laura turned to face her daughter. But I know we can't afford to be afraid of our own house. We don't have anywhere else to go. The truth of that statement settled between them, heavy and undeniable. Maya's expression shifted, anger giving way to something that looked uncomfortably like pity. I'm sorry, Maya said quietly. About yesterday. What I said about Dad and the money. You weren't wrong. Laura's throat tightened. I did spend everything. And I don't know if it was the right choice. But it's the only choice we have now. Tommy's voice drifted from the hallway. The coffee smells good. Walter says his mother used to make coffee that smelled like that. Maya's eyes met Laura's, and in that shared glance was acknowledgement of a problem neither knew how to address. The contractor arrived exactly an hour later, pulling up in a battered pickup truck that had seen better decades. Laura watched from the kitchen window as he climbed out. Mid-30s, she guessed, with the kind of build that came from actual physical labor rather than gym memberships. Tool belts slung low, work boots that had earned their scuffs. James Kearns moved with the careful confidence of someone who understood structures, assessing the mansion's exterior with a practiced eye before he'd even reached the porch. Laura met him at the door. Up close, she could see the tiredness around his eyes that probably matched her own, the kind that came from carrying weight that never lightened. Ms. Matthew. His handshake was firm, calloused. Jimmy. Nobody calls me James except my ex-wife when she's angry, which is most of the time. Despite everything, Laura found herself almost smiling. Laura, and thank you for coming on short notice. Not like my schedule's overflowing. Jimmy's gaze traveled up the mansion's facade, and something shifted in his expression. Not fear exactly, but recognition of a significant challenge. How long since anyone lived here? Decades, from what I understand. The listing said 1987 was the last occupancy. Jimmy let out a low whistle. That explains some things. Mind if I look around? Get a sense of what we're working with? Please. Laura stepped back, allowing him entry into the grand foyer. She watched as Jimmy conducted his assessment with methodical efficiency. He tested floorboards, examined ceiling joists, ran his hands along walls in a way that seemed almost intimate. His commentary was a steady stream of observations both concerning and oddly comforting in their specificity. Foundation solid, that's good news. Victorian construction, they built to last back then. He crouched to examine the baseboards, frowning. Water damage here, probably from the roof. We'll need to check the attic first. Stop any active leaks before we do cosmetic work. Laura pulled out her phone, opening her notes app to track the growing list of issues. Electrical's going to need complete replacement. Can't trust wiring from the 20s. Fire hazard waiting to happen. Jimmy stood, dusting his hands. Plumbing's probably original too. How's the water pressure? Weak, Laura admitted. And the hot water heater sounds like it's screaming. Yeah, that'll need replacing. Gas lines capped, you said? According to the previous agent. Something about a leak in 87. Jimmy's expression turned thoughtful. I heard about that. My dad did some work in town around then. Mentioned something about Blackwood Manor having gas issues. Never heard the details, though. He paused. You know this place has a reputation, right? I'm learning that. Laura kept her voice neutral. Do you believe in haunted houses? I believe in structural problems that create strange sounds, and I believe in people's imaginations running wild. Jimmy's tone was matter-of-fact. Grew up hearing stories about this place. Always figured they were just classist nonsense. Rich people's mansion gets abandoned, so naturally the townspeople make up ghost stories. Way of coping with inequality, you know? Laura felt something in her chest loosen slightly. A skeptic. Someone who dealt in concrete reality rather than supernatural speculation. The basement, she said. I haven't been down there yet. The listing mentioned it was extensive. Want me to check it out? Should assess the foundation anyway. They found the basement door off the kitchen. Heavy wood, swollen in its frame from moisture. Jimmy had to put his shoulder into it before it gave way with a groan that sounded almost alive. The stairs descended into darkness that Laura's flashlight barely penetrated. The air rising from below was cold and damp, carrying the mineral smell of stone and something else. Something that made the hair on Laura's arms stand up. "After you," Jimmy said, his practical tone grounding her. "Watch your step. These stairs are steep." They descended together into the basement's gloom. Laura's flashlight beam swept across a space far larger than she'd expected. The mansion's entire footprint, divided into rooms whose original purposes she could only guess. "Jesus," Jimmy breathed. "This is incredible. Look at this stonework." He was right. Beneath the dust and cobwebs, the basement was a masterpiece of craftsmanship. Barrel-vaulted ceilings, stone walls fitted so precisely you couldn't slide a knife blade between blocks. The kind of work that didn't exist anymore, built by hands that understood stone as a living thing. "There." Jimmy pointed to the far wall. "You see that?" Laura followed his gesture. Where the natural stone ended, someone had built a brick wall, cruder work, clearly added long after the original construction. Why would someone seal off part of the basement? Laura wondered aloud. Jimmy approached the brick wall, running his hands across its surface. Could be structural. Maybe there was water infiltration, foundation issues. He knocked on the bricks, listening. "But this sounds hollow. There's definitely space behind it." "Is that normal?" "Not particularly." Jimmy pulled out his phone, turning on its flashlight for additional illumination. Could be they were hiding something. Water damage, mold, structural problems they didn't want to deal with. He turned to Laura. "Want me to open it up? Should check what's back there before we make any renovation plans." Laura hesitated. Behind that wall could be nothing. Just an empty space sealed off for forgotten reasons. Or it could be something that explained the mansion's impossibly low price, some catastrophic problem that would make her $47,000 gamble an unmitigated disaster. But she hadn't bought Blackwood Manor by playing it safe. "Yes," she said. "Let's see what we've got." Jimmy nodded, already calculating. "I'll need to bring proper tools. Sledgehammer, pry bar, safety equipment. Give me until tomorrow. I'll come back first thing and we'll crack this open." As they climbed back up the basement stairs, Laura felt the weight of the house pressing down from above. 3 floors of decay and history and whatever had caused every door to slam shut at midnight. Tomorrow they'd break through that brick wall. Tomorrow they'd discover what secrets Blackwood Manor had been keeping for decades. Laura just hoped they were ready for whatever they found. Jimmy arrived at dawn with tools that gleamed in the weak morning light. Laura had been awake for hours, unable to shake the feeling that today would change everything. "Ready." Jimmy hefted the sledgehammer with practiced ease. Laura nodded, though ready felt like the wrong word entirely. Maya appeared on the basement stairs, phone already recording. "For my history project," she explained, though her eyes betrayed deeper curiosity. The first blow sent dust exploding into the air. The second cracked mortar that had held for decades. Jimmy worked with methodical precision, creating an opening just wide enough to peer through. "There's something back here," he said, voice tight with surprise. "Laura, bring the flashlight." She squeezed beside him, shining light through the gap. The beam caught metal, a door, steel and substantial, fitted with a combination lock that gleamed despite its age. "That's not water damage," Maya breathed. It took another hour to clear enough brick to access the door. Jimmy examined the lock mechanism with growing fascination. This is serious security. Someone wanted to keep people out, or keep something in. "Can you open it?" Jimmy pulled out tools Laura didn't recognize. "Shouldn't. But yeah, probably." The lock surrendered with a click that seemed to echo through the entire mansion. Jimmy pulled the heavy door open, and Laura's flashlight beam swept across a sight that stopped her breath. Stacks of paper filled metal shelves, bearer bonds, their ornate printing still visible despite decades in darkness. Gold certificates bundled with rotting rubber bands. Wooden crates containing artifacts that caught the light. Jewelry, coins, something that might have been a Fabergé egg. "Holy shit," Maya whispered. Laura's hands shook as she reached for the nearest bond. The number printed across its face made her vision blur. $50,000. And there were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. This is millions, Jimmy said, his voice hollow with shock. Maybe hundreds of millions. Maya had moved deeper into the vault, drawn to leather-bound journals on a lower shelf. She opened one, her artist's eye scanning the meticulous handwriting. Then her face went pale. "Mom, you need to read this." Laura took the journal, struggling to focus on words that seemed to writhe on the page. Victor Blackwood's account of his business practices. Worker accidents that weren't accidents. Payments to officials for looking the other way. Union organizers who disappeared. Names, dates, crimes documented with chilling precision. March 15, 1923. Maya read aloud from another journal. Pietro Martinelli becoming problematic. Arranged solution with Sullivan. Body disposed in foundation wall. Wife believes he abandoned family. Better that way. The temperature in the vault dropped precipitously. Laura's breath misted in the suddenly frigid air. From upstairs came a sound like thunder. Every door in the mansion slamming simultaneously. Tommy's scream cut through the stone walls. "Mom! They're all here now. They're so angry." The lights flickered. Objects began to fall from the vault's shelves. Not randomly but deliberately. Thrown by invisible hands. Maya stumbled backward, her phone clattering to the floor. And in the corner of the vault, where shadows gathered thickest, Laura saw him. A man in worker's clothes, his face twisted with rage and grief, his form flickering like a candle flame. Pietro Martinelli had waited a century for someone to find his story. Now that they had, he wasn't letting them leave. Laura spent the night researching. Her laptop screen the only light in a house that felt suddenly hostile. By dawn, she'd found a name that appeared repeatedly in local forums. Sophia Martinelli, town historian, keeper of Ashford Springs' darkest memories. The address led to a narrow house on the edge of town, its porch overflowing with newspaper archives and labor movement memorabilia. Laura knocked, and the door opened before her hand left the wood. "You found something." The elderly woman's eyes were sharp, knowing. "In the mansion. How did you?" "I've been waiting 70 years for someone to find it." Sophia stepped back, gesturing Laura inside. "My father was Pietro Martinelli, union organizer, officially listed as abandoning his family in 1923. Her voice hardened. "But I always knew Victor Blackwood had him killed." Laura's throat tightened. "The journals. They mention your father. They describe how he died." Sophia's composure cracked slightly. "I need to see them. I need proof of what everyone said was just a grieving daughter's imagination." They sat surrounded by decades of compiled evidence. Newspaper clippings, factory records, testimonies Sophia had collected from descendants of workers who'd simply vanished. The weight of her dedication was palpable, suffocating. "The spirits won't rest," Sophia said flatly. "Not until their stories are told. Not until the world knows what Victor Blackwood did." "I need help with the supernatural activity," Laura admitted. "My son is seeing things, hearing things." "Your son is a medium." Sophia's matter-of-fact tone made it sound ordinary. "The spirits recognize his openness. They'll use him to communicate." That evening, Sophia arrived at Blackwood Manor with candles and objects Laura didn't recognize. Tommy sat in the center of the circle they created in the library, his journal clutched tight. "Pietro Martinelli," Sophia called into the darkness. "Papa, I'm here. I've been here all along." The temperature plummeted. Tommy's eyes rolled back, and when he spoke, the voice wasn't his own. Deeper, carrying an accent, words tumbling out in Italian mixed with English. "Sophia, mia figlia, so long I've waited, so long we've all waited." Through Tommy's small body, Pietro's rage and anguish poured forth. The other workers' stories followed, 15 men who'd been murdered, their bodies hidden in the mansion's foundation, their families left to wonder and grieve without closure. "Tell our stories," Pietro's voice commanded through Tommy. "Make them remember. Make them know what we suffered for his gold." The spirit's power manifested physically. Books flew from shelves, Windows rattled. The floor beneath them trembled. Maya appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion, and screamed as a young woman's ghost materialized beside her. Sarah O'Brien, 19 years old, maid in the mansion, died under mysterious circumstances that the journals revealed were murder when she threatened to expose Blackwood's crimes. Laura's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. Ms. Matthew. The voice was cultured, precise. My name is Vincent Blackwood III. I believe you have something that belongs to my family. We need to talk about the future of my grandfather's property, and whatever you may have found inside it. The call disconnected. Pietro's spirit screamed through Tommy's mouth, a sound of pure, century-old fury. The war for the fortune had begun. Vincent Blackwood III arrived 3 days later without warning, a silver Mercedes pulling up to the mansion like a declaration of ownership. Laura watched from the window as he emerged. Tailored suit, silver hair, the kind of confident posture that came from never having been told no. The lawyer beside him carried a briefcase that probably cost more than Laura's car. Ms. Matthew. Vincent's smile didn't reach his eyes as Laura opened the door. I apologize for the unannounced visit, but given the sensitivity of what we need to discuss, I thought discretion was warranted. I don't recall inviting you inside. Legally, you may not need to. The lawyer stepped forward, producing documents. There are complex inheritance law precedents regarding property found within historically significant estates. Anything discovered on these grounds could be argued to fall under the Blackwood family trust. Laura's hands clenched at her sides. This is my property. I have the deed. You have a deed to a structure. Vincent's polite veneer cracked slightly. Not to everything within it. My family built this mansion. My grandfather's possessions. Your grandfather was a murderer. The words escaped before Laura could stop them. I've read his journals. I know what he did to those workers. Vincent's expression went cold. Careful, Ms. Matthew. Slander is a serious accusation. My family's legacy is documented in his own handwriting. Laura felt her fear transforming into anger. He kept records. Names, dates, how he disposed of the bodies. The lawyer's face paled. Vincent's jaw tightened dangerously. I've been trying to acquire this property for 15 years, Vincent said quietly. I knew there was something here, something my grandfather hid before the investigation started. That fortune is my birthright. My family lost everything because of governmental overreach and worker agitators spreading lies. Lies! Laura's voice rose. There are bodies buried on this property. Real people with families who grieve them. And I'm sure you've reported that to the proper authorities? Vincent's smile returned, sharp as broken glass. Or perhaps you were hoping to keep your discovery quiet, make some arrangements that might benefit you financially? Before Laura could respond, a patrol car pulled into the drive. Detective Marcus Rivera emerged, his weathered face unreadable. Mr. Blackwood, Marcus said, his tone professionally neutral. I received your call about suspicious activity at this address. Detective. Vincent's posture shifted subtly, less aggressive, more victim. Ms. Matthew has made some concerning claims about my family. I'm worried she may be experiencing some kind of breakdown. Single mother, financial stress, moving into a house with a difficult history. I'm fine. Laura cut in. And I haven't made any claims I can't support with evidence. Marcus's eyes flickered with interest. Evidence. Laura hesitated. Revealing the journals meant revealing the fortune. But Vincent already knew about both. My grandfather was a factory owner, Marcus said quietly. Immigrated from Mexico in 1920. Worked in Victor Blackwood's steel plant. He turned to Vincent. He used to tell stories about men who spoke up about safety conditions. Men who just disappeared. Vincent's expression shuddered. Family folklore isn't evidence. No, Marcus agreed. But actual documentation would be. He looked at Laura. Ms. Matthew, if you have information about potential crimes, even historical ones, I need to see it. Before anyone could respond, Maya burst from the house, phone in hand. Mom, you need to see this. My history project presentation, it went viral. Laura took the phone, her stomach dropping as she saw the view count. 50,000. 75,000. Still climbing. Maya had included photos from the journals, details about Victor Blackwood's crimes, a call for justice for the forgotten workers. The local news had picked it up. Regional outlets were sharing it. Twitter was exploding with outrage and fascination. You stupid girl, Vincent hissed. Do you have any idea what you've done? Made sure everyone knows the truth, Maya shot back. Made sure those men aren't forgotten anymore. Marcus's radio crackled. State police were on their way, the dispatcher reported. Media requests flooding the department. The mayor demanding answers about bodies potentially buried at Blackwood Manor. Laura's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You've attracted attention you don't want. Leave what isn't yours or learn why discretion matters. A black SUV with tinted windows cruised slowly past the mansion. Not police. Not media. Something else entirely. Vincent saw it too. And for the first time, Laura detected fear beneath his entitled rage. You don't know what you've started, he said. There are people who've been looking for Depression-era bearer bonds for decades. People who make me look reasonable. Pietro's spirit manifested suddenly in the doorway behind Maya. Fully visible now, his fury a palpable force. He raised one translucent hand and Vincent flew backward as if shoved, slamming into his Mercedes hard enough to dent the door. The lawyer scrambled for his car. Marcus's hand moved instinctively to his weapon before he registered what he was seeing, or rather, what he couldn't rationally explain. Vincent pulled himself up, his face white with shock and rage. This isn't over. That fortune is mine by right. By blood. Your grandfather's blood, Laura said quietly. Built on other people's suffering. As Vincent's Mercedes disappeared down the drive, the black SUV remained parked 100 yards away. Watching. Waiting. Jimmy appeared beside Laura, having witnessed everything from inside. We need to talk about security, he said. Real security. Because this is about to get a lot worse. The man who appeared at dinner 3 days later didn't knock. Laura simply looked up from her reheated pasta to find him standing in the dining room doorway, hands clasped behind his back like a visiting dignitary. Forgive the intrusion. His accent carried traces of Russian smoothed by decades elsewhere. The front door was unlocked. A dangerous habit in your current situation. Maya's hand moved toward her phone. The man smiled gently. Please don't. I'm not here to threaten, Ms. Matthew. Merely to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement. He gestured to an empty chair. May I? Laura's voice came out steadier than she felt. Who are you? Alexei Volkov. I represent certain parties with an interest in Depression-era financial instruments. He sat with fluid grace, his expensive suit somehow making their shabby dining room look even more decrepit. Bearer bonds, specifically. We've been tracking their movement for quite some time. We're not interested in selling anything, Laura said. Of course not, because legally you can't. Bearer bonds that old exist in a fascinating gray area. Technically negotiable by whoever holds them, but practically impossible to redeem through legitimate channels. Alexei's smile widened. Unless one has the right connections. Tommy had gone very still. His eyes fixed on Alexei with an intensity that made Laura's skin crawl. He has blood on his hands, Tommy whispered. So much blood. Alexei's gaze shifted to Tommy, something unreadable flickering across his face. Perceptive child. Get out of my house. Laura stood, positioning herself between Alexei and her children. In a moment. First, my offer. Alexei remained seated, unthreatened. We can liquidate those bonds internationally. No questions, no government seizures, no messy legal battles. You would receive 30% of the recovered value. Conservatively, that's $80 million. Enough to secure your children's futures. Enough to never worry about money again. The number hit Laura like a physical blow. 80 million. Maya's art school. Tommy's medical care. Security. Freedom. everything she'd been desperately chasing. And if I refuse, then you make enemies of people far more dangerous than Vincent Blackwood. Alexei's tone remained pleasant, which somehow made the threat more chilling. We've been very patient, but patience has limits. He stood, smoothing his suit. You have 1 week to consider. I'll return for your answer. He paused at the doorway. For what it's worth, I respect your situation. Single mother, backed into a corner, trying to protect her family. But respect doesn't change mathematics. 30% of something is better than 100% of nothing. After he left, Laura found Maya recording on her phone. Got it all, her daughter said grimly. Evidence. Evidence of what? Jimmy emerged from the kitchen where he'd been listening. He didn't actually threaten you, and he's right about the bonds. They're basically untradeable through normal channels. Laura's phone buzzed. Unknown number again. She answered, putting it on speaker. Ms. Matthew, a woman's voice, younger, educated. Please don't hang up. My name is Grace Blackwood. I'm Vincent's daughter, and I need to warn you about what he's planning. Why would you help me? Because unlike my father, I actually researched what my great-grandfather did. I've spent my adult life trying to atone for the Blackwood name. Grace's voice carried genuine anguish. My father is bankrupt. He needs that fortune to survive. And he's desperate enough to do something catastrophic. Like what? Like partnering with Alexei Volkov. He doesn't understand what he's inviting in. Volkov's organization doesn't share. Once they're involved, everyone becomes expendable. Laura's hands shook. What am I supposed to do? There's another option. A foundation. We use the money to compensate descendants of the workers, fund labor history museums, establish scholarships. Make something good from something evil. Grace paused. I've been researching this for years. I can help navigate the legal complications. But you'd have to be willing to give up any claim to keeping it. Before Laura could respond, Tommy gasped. His eyes had gone distant, unfocused. Walter's showing me something. There are more bodies. Not just in the foundation. Buried around the property. 15 more. Maybe 20. Tommy's voice took on an eerie certainty. He knows where they all are. Jimmy swore softly. If there are more remains, we have to report it, Laura finished. Which means police, forensic teams, media. And no way to keep the fortune quiet, Maya added. Laura's mind raced through impossible calculations. Report the bodies and lose any chance at discretion. Accept Alexei's offer and become complicit with criminals. Partner with Grace and give up financial security. Keep quiet and let murdered workers remain forgotten. Every choice led somewhere dark. A car crashed outside, the screech of metal and shattering glass echoing through the night. Laura ran to the window to see one of the black SUVs that had been watching the house now wrapped around a tree, smoke rising from its crumpled hood. In the driver's seat, the operative's face was frozen in terror, his eyes wide and unseeing. Pietro's spirit manifested on the lawn, still visible in the darkness. His rage a force Laura could feel from inside the house. Marcus Rivera's patrol car arrived within minutes, his face grim as he examined the wreck. The driver was alive but catatonic, muttering about the angry man made of shadows who'd appeared in front of his car. Laura. Marcus approached the porch, his voice low. We need to talk. About everything. Because this situation just escalated beyond anything local law enforcement can handle. The spirits weren't just protecting them anymore. They were declaring war. The state police arrived at dawn, followed by forensic teams, cadaver dogs, and a media circus that descended on Ashford Springs like locusts. Laura stood on the porch watching her gamble transform into a spectacle. News vans lined up like vultures waiting for carrion. Tommy had drawn a map in his journal, crude but precise, marking locations where Walter's spirit-claimed bodies were buried. 19 burial sites across the property. 19 workers who'd vanished into Victor Blackwood's ambition. The first body was discovered by noon. An anthropologist confirmed human remains, likely dating to the 1920s. By evening, they'd found 6 more. Sophia Martinelli arrived as the sun set, supported by Grace Blackwood. The old woman's face was a mask of vindication and grief as Marcus Rivera approached with news. "We found Pietro Martinelli," Marcus said quietly. "Dental records confirm it. He was buried near the eastern property line." Sophia collapsed into Grace's arms, 50 years of waiting culminating in this moment. "I knew," she sobbed. "I always knew. But knowing and proving." Laura watched as the excavation continued under floodlights, each discovery adding weight to the mansion's dark legacy. The media coverage was relentless. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, lawyers, government agencies all demanding statements. Maya handled it better than Laura expected, giving interviews with surprising poise. These men had families, her daughter told a CNN reporter. They had names, lives, futures. Victor Blackwood took all of that for profit. "The least we can do is remember them." The footage went viral. Within 48 hours, Maya had become the face of the story, young, articulate, demanding justice for historical crimes. Support poured in, but so did vitriol. Vincent Blackwood's public statement was a disaster. Cornered by reporters outside his office, he'd snapped, "My grandfather built this town, provided jobs, opportunity. A few workers who couldn't follow safety protocols doesn't erase his legacy." The backlash was immediate and brutal. His real estate empire began crumbling as clients fled. Investors withdrew. Laura almost felt sorry for him, until she remembered his threats, his entitled rage. The legal situation grew more complex daily. The IRS claimed the bonds as unreported assets subject to estate taxes. The Treasury Department argued Depression-era bearer bonds were potentially fraudulent. Pennsylvania state officials wanted everything seized as proceeds from criminal activity. Grace arrived one evening with devastating news. "I've been researching the actual value. Most of those bearer bonds expired decades ago. The gold certificates aren't redeemable at face value anymore. Between legal fees, taxes, and authentication costs, we're looking at maybe $12 million in recoverable assets. Not $350 million. Laura felt the number like a punch. $12 million. Still life-changing. Still enough to solve problems. But nothing like what she'd imagined when they'd first opened that vault. "Vincent knows," Grace continued. "He's desperate. His creditors are circling. And he's been in contact with Alexei Volkov." As if summoned, Alexei appeared the next morning with a new offer. 70% of liquidated assets to his organization. 30 days to deliver or face consequences. "You've made this situation very public, Ms. Matthew." His pleasant demeanor had cooled. "That complicates matters. Complicated matters become expensive. The terms have changed accordingly. Get off my property." Laura's voice shook with fury and fear. Alexei's smile was winter cold. 30 days. Consider carefully what refusing me means." That night, Vincent attempted to break into the mansion. Drunk, unhinged, accompanied by 2 hired men who clearly had no idea what they were getting into. They made it as far as the basement before Pietro's spirit manifested with unprecedented violence. Laura heard Vincent's screams from upstairs. By the time she and Marcus, who'd taken to staying nearby, reached the basement, Vincent was cowering in a corner, babbling about his grandfather's ghost, about walls bleeding, about hands reaching from stone. His hired men had fled. Vincent was arrested, charged with breaking and entering, assault with the crowbar he'd been carrying. But as Marcus led him away, Vincent's parting words chilled Laura to her core. "You think you've won? Volkov doesn't care about police or ghosts. 30 days, Laura. Then you'll understand what real consequences look like." The forensic team finished their excavation a week later. 15 confirmed victims: Pietro Martinelli, Sarah O'Brien, Walter Kowalski, 12 others whose identities were still being determined. Sophia organized a memorial service on the mansion grounds. Descendants of the murdered workers arrived, some from across the country, drawn by Maya's viral advocacy. They stood together in the place where their ancestors had died, finally able to grieve with certainty. Tommy stood beside Laura, holding her hand. "They're calmer now," he said quietly. "The spirits. They're not angry anymore. Just waiting." Waiting for what? For justice. Real justice. Not just finding their bodies. Making sure what happened to them matters. Laura looked at the crowd gathered on her property. Descendants, historians, activists, media. Looked at Maya filming everything for the documentary she was now creating. Looked at the mansion that had consumed her savings and transformed her life into something unrecognizable. The fortune was probably gone. Government seizures, legal battles, the reality that Depression-era bonds weren't worth their face value. All of it meant she'd end up with nothing. Or close to nothing. But standing there, watching Sophia finally lay flowers at her father's grave, Laura felt something shift inside her. Maybe that was okay. Maybe some things mattered more than money. The thought terrified her. Because terrified or not, she still had children to feed, bills to pay, a future to secure. And in 23 days, Alexei Volkov would return for his answer. The black SUVs arrived at 2 a.m. on day 29. Laura woke to the sound of gravel crunching, multiple vehicles taking positions around the property. Her phone showed missed calls from Marcus. A warning she'd received too late. She moved quickly, waking Maya and Tommy. "Basement. Now, the vault, lock yourselves inside." "Mom," Maya started. "Now." Laura's tone left no room for argument. They'd barely reached the first floor when the front door exploded inward. Not picked. Not forced. Blown open with controlled violence that sent splinters across the foyer. Alexei entered first, flanked by 4 men whose eyes carried the flat effect of professional killers. "Ms. Matthew, I did give you 30 days. It's only been 29. I'm early. The situation required adjustment." Alexei's pleasant demeanor had evaporated entirely. "Your publicity campaign made discreet liquidation impossible. That changes our arrangement significantly." Before Laura could respond, she heard more vehicles. Vincent Blackwood's voice carried through the darkness. "The vault is in the basement. East wall, behind the brick." He'd brought his own people. Desperate, dangerous men who had nothing to lose. The two groups converged in the foyer, and the atmosphere shifted from threatening to explosive. Alexei's operatives and Vincent's hired thugs faced each other with the recognition of predators meeting over the same kill. "Blackwood." Alexei's voice went ice-cold. "This is remarkably stupid. Even for you. That fortune is mine by right." Vincent was disheveled, unhinged. The restraining order from his arrest apparently meaningless. "You're just a vulture looking to profit from my family's legacy. Your family's legacy is murder and theft. I'm simply more honest about my intentions." Alexei gestured, and his men moved with practiced efficiency, blocking the basement entrance. Vincent's people moved to counter, hands going to weapons. Laura lunged for the basement door, praying Maya and Tommy had made it to the vault. Her hand touched the knob just as the first shot was fired. She didn't see who fired, only that suddenly everyone was moving, shouting, violence erupting in her entrance hall like something unleashed from hell itself. Then the temperature dropped. Not gradually, instantaneously. Laura's breath misted in air that had been warm seconds before. Frost spread across the walls in patterns that looked almost deliberate. Every door in the mansion slammed shut simultaneously, the signature sound that had terrified them that first night, now multiplied tenfold. Windows rattled in their frames. The chandelier swayed violently despite the absence of wind. Pietro Martinelli's spirit manifested in the center of the foyer, no longer flickering or translucent. Solid. Real. His rage a physical force that drove men to their knees. "Jesus Christ." One of Vincent's men stumbled backward, firing blindly. The bullet passed through Pietro's form and shattered a window. More spirits appeared. Sarah O'Brien on the stairs, her young face twisted with righteous fury. Walter near the basement door, his child's innocence replaced by something ancient and terrible. A dozen other workers, all the murdered dead, rising to defend what had become their memorial. The mansion itself seemed to fight back. Doors locked, trapping Vincent's men in rooms that grew progressively colder. Stairs became treacherous, men slipping on surfaces that shouldn't be slick. Objects flew from shelves, not random but targeted, striking with impossible accuracy. One of Alexei's operatives screamed as invisible hands gripped his throat, lifting him off the ground. Another was driven toward a window by a force he couldn't see, couldn't fight. Laura heard sirens, Marcus and backup finally arriving. But the spirits weren't waiting for human justice. She made it to the basement, found Maya and Tommy not in the vault but standing before it. Tommy's eyes had rolled back, his mouth moving with words in languages he'd never learned. Pietro speaking through him, using her son as a conduit for century-old vengeance. Behind the children, in the vault itself, something darker stirred. Laura saw him, Victor Blackwood Sr., his spirit as malevolent in death as he'd been in life. The industrialist's ghost reached for Vincent with hands like claws, a father claiming his heir. No! Laura lunged forward, but Maya caught her arm. Mom, look! Vincent stood paralyzed as his great-grandfather's spirit circled him like a predator. You wanted the legacy? Victor's voice was rot and ruin. You wanted to claim what's mine? Then inherit it all, the wealth, the crimes, the damnation. Pietro's spirit advanced on Victor's, two forces colliding in a supernatural battle that made the air crack with energy. Tommy collapsed, the connection severing. Laura caught her son as he fell. Above them, Marcus and his officers had entered the chaos. Shouting, confusion, men surrendering to avoid whatever supernatural force was destroying them. Laura made a decision born of desperation and clarity. She ran to the vault, grabbed the nearest stack of bearer bonds, and held them to the candle Maya had been using for light. What are you doing? Maya screamed. Ending this. Laura watched the bonds catch fire, century-old paper going up like kindling. She grabbed another stack, another. If there's no fortune, there's no reason to fight. Mom, that's millions. I don't care. Laura was crying, laughing, feeding bond after bond to the flames. I don't care anymore. The spirit's fury shifted. Pietro turned from his battle with Victor's ghost to watch Laura destroy the fortune he died protecting. For a moment, his rage intensified, then something in his expression changed. Understanding, recognition, approval. She was doing what he couldn't, ensuring the blood money could never corrupt another generation. Jimmy appeared in the vault entrance, drawn by the flames. He saw what Laura was doing and, after only a heartbeat's hesitation, joined her. Together they fed the fire, burning wealth that had cost so many their lives. Vincent's scream echoed through the basement as he watched his birthright literally go up in smoke. He lunged forward, but Pietro's spirit blocked him, holding him immobile while the bonds burned. Alexei appeared at the top of the basement stairs, taking in the scene with cold calculation. He watched the fire for a long moment, then simply turned and left. Laura heard his vehicles departing, professional enough to recognize when a situation was unwinnable. The bonds burned until only ash remained. Gold certificates, artifacts, everything that could easily be liquidated, destroyed in an act of defiant sacrifice. When the flames finally died, the spirit's presence changed. The rage drained away, replaced by something that felt almost like peace. Pietro's spirit approached Tommy one final time, laying a translucent hand on the boy's head. A blessing. A thank you. Then he faded, and the other spirits followed. The mansion fell silent except for police radios upstairs, officers processing a scene they'd never be able to adequately explain. Laura sat amid the ashes of $350 million. Her children pressed against her sides, and felt lighter than she had in years. Vincent was arrested again. Alexei was gone. The fortune was destroyed. And somehow, impossibly, they'd survived. The aftermath came in waves. Legal, financial, emotional. Laura sat in a state attorney's office 3 weeks after the confrontation, exhausted but clear-eyed as Grace Blackwood presented the complex settlement proposal she'd been negotiating. The bonds you burned represented about 60% of the total assets, Grace explained, spreading documents across the conference table. But the gold certificates, the artifacts, several items you couldn't reach in time, those remain. Current assessed value is approximately $11 million. Laura felt the number settle in her chest. Not the fortune she'd imagined, but still life-changing. Multiple government agencies have filed claims, the state attorney added. However, given the unique circumstances, your role in exposing historical crimes, the public interest in establishing a memorial, we've reached a compromise. The settlement was more generous than Laura had dared hope. 60% of recovered assets would fund a foundation for descendants of Blackwood's victims and labor history preservation. 30% to Pennsylvania for historical education initiatives. 10% to Laura for her cooperation and the property's ongoing use as a memorial site. Roughly $1 million. After taxes, legal fees, and everything else, maybe $700,000. Not enough to never worry about money, but enough to renovate the mansion properly. Enough to establish the bed and breakfast she'd originally envisioned. Enough to breathe. There's a condition, Grace said quietly. The mansion must remain as Blackwood Memorial. The vault becomes a museum space. The property serves as educational site about labor history and the cost of unchecked industrial greed. Laura looked at her children. Tommy nodded immediately. Maya's expression was thoughtful. "Mom," Maya said, "I've been talking to documentary filmmakers. They want to do a full series about this, the discovery, the history, the worker stories. They're offering to fund scholarships in the victims' names. And they want me as a consultant." Pride swelled in Laura's chest. Her angry, grieving daughter had found purpose in honoring the dead. "Yes," Laura said. "We accept." The renovation began in earnest. Jimmy's crew expanded from just him to 4 workers. All local, all grateful for steady employment in a town that had seen too many businesses close. Laura worked alongside them, learning skills she'd never imagined needing. Walls were repaired, floors refinished. The mansion transformed slowly from Gothic horror to welcoming historical site, its dark past acknowledged rather than hidden. Sophia became a constant presence, her lifetime of research finally serving its intended purpose. She worked with Maya to create displays in the converted vault, photographs of the victims, their stories, the broader context of labor exploitation in 1920s America. "My father would have liked this," Sophia said one afternoon, touching Pietro's photograph with trembling fingers, using the site of his murder to educate, to prevent future atrocities. The memorial service came 6 months after the discovery. Laura stood on the mansion's restored porch watching as descendants arrived, families connected by shared tragedy, meeting some for the first time. The mayor gave a speech acknowledging Ashford Springs' complicity in covering up the crimes. Marcus Rivera spoke about his grandfather's generation, the workers who'd built America's industrial might with their blood and received so little recognition. Then Maya stepped forward. At 17 now, she'd grown into her activist voice with remarkable confidence. These 15 men, Pietro Martinelli, Walter Kowalski, Sarah O'Brien, and 12 others still being identified, they didn't die in accidents, Maya said, her voice carrying across the crowd. They were murdered for demanding basic safety, fair wages, the right to organize. Victor Blackwood documented his crimes with chilling precision, never imagining he'd be held accountable. She gestured to the memorial garden where the bodies had been found, now transformed into a place of reflection. "We can't bring them back. We can't undo what was done. But we can remember. We can learn. We can ensure that their suffering meant something." The crowd was silent, respectful, grieving for ancestors they'd never known existed. Laura felt Jimmy's hand find hers. Their relationship had deepened through the renovation. Partnership built on shared labor and mutual respect rather than romance novel intensity. He'd been there through the nightmares, the legal battles, the moments when Laura questioned every decision she'd made. "You did good," he murmured. "Really good." Tommy tugged her other hand. "Mom, look." Pietro's spirit stood at the edge of the memorial garden. Barely visible, more suggestion than substance. But his expression had changed. The rage was gone. In its place, something that looked like peace. He nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement and farewell. Then he faded, and Laura knew he wouldn't return. The spirits had found their rest. That evening, the Matthew family plus Jimmy shared dinner in the mansion's restored dining room. Actual furniture now, not inflatable mattresses and camping gear. The rooms above were being converted to guest suites. The kitchen had passed health inspection. In 2 weeks, they'd welcome their first paying guests. Letter came today, Maya said, producing an envelope. Rhode Island School of Design. Full scholarship thanks to the foundation we established. Laura's eyes filled. Her daughter's dream, the one she'd thought was lost forever, restored through the most unlikely path imaginable. And I got picked for the gifted program, Tommy added quietly. The teacher said I have unique perceptive abilities. She doesn't know how right she is. They laughed together, the sound filling spaces that had held only darkness for so long. Laura's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You chose integrity over wealth. Rare in this world. Respect. Volkov. She deleted it without responding. Some acknowledgments didn't require answer. Marcus stopped by later, off-duty, bringing a bottle of wine to celebrate the memorial success. Vincent's been sentenced, he reported. 3 years for the break-in and assault. His empire's completely collapsed. Last I heard, he's working as a property manager in Scranton. His daughter, though, Jimmy said. Grace is doing good work with the foundation. Breaking the family curse, Marcus agreed. Takes courage to reject that kind of legacy. They toasted to second chances, to justice delayed but not denied, to the possibility of redemption even in the darkest circumstances. Later, after everyone had left, Laura stood in what had been the library, now a comfortable reading room with restored shelves and actual books. She thought about the woman who'd arrived here 9 months ago, desperate and terrified, gambling everything on an impossible hope. That woman wouldn't recognize who Laura had become. Stronger, more certain, still scared sometimes, but no longer paralyzed by fear. The mansion creaked around her, but the sounds were familiar now. Comfortable. This place that had seemed so hostile had become genuinely home. Not because she'd found a fortune, because she'd chosen to do the right thing even when it cost her everything. Tommy appeared in the doorway, pajamas on, journal under his arm. The house feels different now, he said. Lighter, like it can breathe again. Laura pulled him close. Yeah, it can. We all can. Outside, Blackwood Manor's windows glowed warm against the autumn darkness. No longer a Gothic monument to greed and suffering. A home, a memorial, a place where the past was honored and the future felt possible. Laura Matthew had gambled everything on a haunted mansion. And in losing the fortune, she'd found something far more valuable. 6 months later, Laura stood on the mansion's front porch watching the sunrise paint Blackwood Manor in shades of gold and amber. The Victorian stone seemed softer now, welcoming rather than foreboding. Fresh paint gleamed on the trim. The wraparound porch no longer sagged. Flowers that Sophia had planted lined the walkway, hardy perennials that would return each spring, a living memorial. The sign near the entrance read, Blackwood Memorial Inn and Labor History Museum, EST 2025, in memory of those who built America. Today was the grand opening. Laura adjusted the banner Maya had designed, artistic and dignified, featuring sketched portraits of the 15 identified victims. Her daughter's talent had found its purpose, transforming trauma into education, grief into advocacy. Cars began arriving by mid-morning. Descendants first, families who'd traveled from across the country to see where their ancestors had worked, suffered, died. Laura greeted each one personally, learning names, hearing stories that had been passed down through generations. My great-grandfather was Walter Kowalski, a woman in her 60s said, tears streaming down her face. We were told he abandoned the family. For 80 years we believed he just left. Thank you for giving us the truth. Even if it hurts, it's better than lies. Tommy appeared at Laura's side, confident now in ways that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Would you like to see where Walter's buried? I can show you the memorial garden. The woman took his offered hand, and Laura watched her son. Her sensitive, perceptive son who saw things others couldn't. lead her toward the restored grounds with gentle authority. Inside, the transformation was complete. The grand foyer's chandelier had been professionally restored, now casting warm light across polished floors. The peeling wallpaper was gone, replaced by period-appropriate designs researched by Sophia. But it was the vault that drew the most attention. The steel door stood open now permanently. Inside, the space had been converted into a small but powerful museum. Photographs lined the walls, the 15 victims in life, recovered from archives and family collections. Pietro Martinelli smiling at his wedding. Sarah O'Brien in her Sunday dress. Walter Kowalski as a small boy, gap-toothed and hopeful. Victor Blackwood's journals were displayed in protective cases, open to pages that documented his crimes in his own handwriting. No sanitizing, no euphemisms, just the brutal truth of what greed had wrought. Maya stood near the entrance, speaking to a reporter from the New York Times. At 17, she'd become poised beyond her years, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd stared down darkness and emerged stronger. "This isn't just about the past," Maya explained. "It's about recognizing patterns that still exist: exploitation, disposable workers, valuing profit over human life. These men died because someone decided their safety was less important than his wealth. How is that different from companies today that ignore safety violations, that fight unions, that treat employees as expendable?" The reporter scribbled notes, nodding. Laura felt pride swell in her chest. Her angry, grieving daughter had become a voice for justice. Jimmy found Laura in the kitchen, where caterers were preparing for the reception. His presence had become as natural as breathing, partner in the business, in life, in the daily work of building something meaningful from ruins. "Guest rooms are fully booked for the next 3 months, he reported. Mix of tourists and labor historians. The foundation's already getting requests to host conferences here." "We're really doing this," Laura said, wonder in her voice. "Actually making it work. You did this." Jimmy pulled her close. "You took the hardest path, the one that cost you the fortune, and created something that matters more." The ceremony began at noon. Grace Blackwood spoke first, her voice steady despite the weight of her family name. "I am the great-granddaughter of a murderer," she said simply. "I cannot undo what Victor Blackwood did. I cannot restore the lives he took. But I can ensure that his crimes are never forgotten, and that his ill-gotten wealth, what remains of it, serves the people he exploited." She announced the foundation's first scholarships, 15 awards named for each identified victim, going to descendants of immigrant workers pursuing education in labor rights, social work, and history. Sophia was helped to the podium by her granddaughter. She'd found family she'd never known existed through the descendant network Maya had created. At 71, her lifetime mission accomplished, she looked both exhausted and at peace. "For 50 years, I maintained vigil," Sophia said, her voice wavering but determined. "I collected evidence no one wanted to see. I told stories no one wanted to hear. I believed my father when the world called me a liar." She gestured to Pietro's photograph. "Papa, they know now. They all know. You can rest." The crowd stood in respectful silence. Then Marcus Rivera stepped forward, his grandfather's name now etched on the memorial. "These men built America," Marcus said. "Their labor, their sacrifice, their blood literally mixed into the foundations of our prosperity. The least we owe them is remembrance. The least we owe ourselves is the honesty to acknowledge how our comfort was purchased." Maya unveiled her art installation, 15 portraits, each one lovingly rendered from old photographs, arranged in a circle like a gathering. Descendants wept seeing their ancestors honored, elevated from footnotes to central figures in history. Tommy led tours throughout the afternoon, his gentle manner and deep connection to the mansion's history making him uniquely suited to the role. School groups listened raptly as he explained the workers' lives, their dreams, the brutal reality of their deaths. "This room is where they found the journals," Tommy said, standing in what had been the library. "The man who built this house wrote down everything he did. He thought he'd never face consequences. But secrets don't stay hidden forever." Laura watched from the doorway, marveling at her son's transformation. The boy who'd been bullied for being different was now teaching, inspiring, making people understand truths they'd rather ignore. As sunset approached, Laura found herself alone in the Volturn Museum. She stood before Pietro's photograph, remembering the rage of his spirit, the century of waiting for justice. "We did it," she whispered. "Not the way I expected, not the way I wanted, but we honored you, all of you." A warmth touched her shoulder, not frightening, not cold, just a moment of connection, a whisper of gratitude from whatever remained of Pietro's consciousness. Then it was gone, and Laura was alone with history and hope. The reception flowed into evening. Descendants shared stories, comparing family trees, discovering connections. The inn's first guests checked in, a labor historian from Berkeley, a documentary crew filming a series on American industrial history, 3 descendants staying to explore their family's connection to Ashford Springs. The town that had been dying was breathing again. The mansion that had been a monument to shame had become a beacon of education and reconciliation. Laura stood on the porch as stars emerged, Jimmy beside her, watching the warm light spilling from Blackwood Manor's windows. "No regrets?" Jimmy asked softly. Laura thought about the fortune she'd burned, the millions that could have secured easy lives for her children, the wealth she'd destroyed in an act of desperate defiance. "None," she said, and meant it. "We have enough. More than enough. We have purpose, community, a future we built with our own hands." Tommy joined them, Maya following. The 4 of them stood together, a family forged in crisis, strengthened by choosing integrity over wealth. "It feels right here now," Tommy said quietly. "The house is happy. The spirits are at peace. Everything that needed to happen, happened." Maya leaned against Laura's shoulder. "Think we'll ever tell the whole story? About the spirits, the supernatural stuff?" "People know what they need to know," Laura said. "The murders were real. The victims were real. The justice we provided was real. The rest," she smiled, "the rest is just between us and the ghosts." Inside, laughter drifted from the dining room where descendants shared a meal. The clinking of glasses, the murmur of stories being told and retold, finally heard by ears willing to listen. Laura Matthew had arrived at Blackwood Manor, a desperate widow gambling her last savings on an impossible dream. She stood here now as an innkeeper, educator, accidental historian. The woman who'd found a fortune and given it away. The woman who'd chosen justice over security and discovered that integrity was its own reward. The house that had held so much darkness now glowed with light and purpose. And somewhere in its walls, in the stones that had witnessed so much suffering, 15 spirits finally rested. Their stories told, their names remembered, their deaths transformed into something that might prevent future tragedies. Laura looked up at the mansion, her mansion now truly, and whispered, "Thank you for the haunting, for the fortune, for the impossible choice that had led her family exactly where they needed to be." Blackwood Manor had claimed them that first night, but in the end they'd reclaimed it, and in doing so had found their way home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.